I have often thought it strange that the very things which give us the deepest happiness also awaken in us a kind of ache. The beauty of a sunrise, the laughter of a child, the quiet dignity of love. They do not leave us satisfied, as a good meal might. Rather, they stir in us a hunger which no earthly feast seems to appease. It is as though every delight here carries within it both a promise and a disappointment. A promise of something greater, and a disappointment because it never quite fulfills the promise. Most pleasures whisper to us, "This is only a shadow." And when we chase them as though they were the substance, they dissolve in our hands. What if these longings are not a cruel trick? What if they are signposts pointing us toward a homeland where joy itself is complete? I speak to you now as one who has lived long enough to notice the pattern. The things of this world, be they love, friendship, art, or nature, shine brilliantly for a moment and then fade. They are real gifts, and we must never despise them. Yet, if we are honest, we know they are not enough. Each gift is like the shaft of sunlight falling through the window. It illuminates the dust in the air, but it also makes us look toward the sun from which it comes. Our desires are too great for this world because they are not meant to end here. The heart of man was not fashioned for temporary joys alone, but for the eternal. If I find in myself a longing that nothing in time or space can satisfy, then surely I was made for another world. That is not to say that this world is meaningless. Quite the contrary. It is rich with meaning, precisely because it is sacramental, charged with hints of the greater reality to which it points. Consider the strange feeling we call nostalgia. You may remember your childhood, a place or season in which you once lived, and the memory stirs in you both sweetness and sorrow. You do not merely wish to relive the past, rather you long for something behind the past, something the memory only awakened. Nostalgia is not the desire to return, but the desire to arrive at the place where every moment is gathered into wholeness, and nothing beautiful is ever lost. That place, of course, is what Scripture calls heaven. We make a grave mistake when we expect the world to carry the weight of our eternal desires. Imagine asking a shadow to be the object rather than its outline. Imagine trying to drink from the reflection of water rather than the fountain itself. The world is filled with shadows and reflections, but they point us toward the spring of life, which is God. To demand final satisfaction from them is like blaming a violin for not being a symphony, or a candle for not being the sun. They were never meant to bear such a burden. Yet there is another danger. Some, realizing the insufficiency of earthly joys, fall into cynicism. They scorn beauty, mistrust pleasure, and close their hearts. But this is a kind of ingratitude. For though the world is not enough, it is still good. A rose does not contain all of heaven, but it carries in its fragrance a whisper of paradise. A human love, imperfect though it is not eternal, but it can serve as a window through which eternal love shines. To despise the gift because it is not the giver is folly. We live, then, in a tension. We must cherish the gifts without mistaking them for the final joy. This requires discernment, the wisdom to enjoy wine without drunkenness, love without idolatry, beauty without despair. The road to heaven is not paved by fleeing the world, nor by clutching it too tightly, but by walking through it as pilgrims, accepting each joy as a token from our true country. Indeed, the very restlessness of our hearts is itself a mercy. If we were fully content here, we might never lift our eyes beyond the horizon. Our dissatisfaction with earthly delights is the compass needle pointing home. Think of a child at play. He builds a house of sand on the shore, proud of his little kingdom. Yet, when the tide rises, the castle is swept away. The child weeps for a moment, but soon he begins to dream of a fortress that the sea cannot reach. So it is with us. Every loss, every disappointment, every fleeting beauty is a gentle reminder that we were never meant to build our homes upon the sand. The Christian hope is not merely that we shall escape death, but that all the fragments of joy we have ever known will be gathered up and fulfilled. The laughter of friends, the warmth of love, the majesty of music, all these are not discarded, but redeemed, transfigured in the eternal kingdom. Heaven is not the negation of earth's delights, but their consummation. As a bud blossoms into a rose, so earthly joy blossoms into heavenly fulfillment. And so, when you find your heart aching after beauty, do not call it folly. When you feel the pang of longing after even your happiest moments, do not dismiss it as weakness. These are not errors, they are signals. They are the pulse of eternity in your veins, the echo of a melody you have not yet heard in full. If we are to understand this longing for heaven rightly, we must first put aside some of the popular caricatures. Too many imagine heaven as an endless harp concert, or a vague cloud of spirits floating without substance. Such pictures are not only uninspiring, they are profoundly misleading. The Scriptures do not speak of heaven as a place where reality is diminished, but where it is intensified. It is not less solid than the world we know. It is more solid. If anything, we are the shadows, and heaven is the substance. Think of the way a mirror reflects a landscape. The reflection is real in one sense, yet thinner, dimmer, and more fragile than the scene itself. You can smear or shatter it with a touch. Our world, beautiful as it is but the mirror. Heaven is the landscape itself. And so, when we step into eternity, it will not be into some gossamer dream, but into the true country, of which every field, mountain, and stream here has been the pale rehearsal. This is why Christ spoke so often of banquets, vineyards, houses, and cities when describing the kingdom. He was not reducing heaven to earthly things. He was raising earthly things into their truer significance. A wedding feast here passes in a few hours and is gone, but in heaven, the joy it foreshadows will never be interrupted. A house on earth can be destroyed by fire or decay, but the dwelling of God is eternal. With foundations no storm can shake. And yet, even with these images, we must be cautious. The danger is to reduce heaven to mere extensions of earthly pleasure. The truth is more mysterious. Every joy we know here is only a fragment of a far greater whole, a note in the music of eternity. If you love a flower, imagine what it would mean to live in the garden from which all flowers spring. If you treasure friendship, imagine the embrace of fellowship untainted by jealousy, pride, or fear. But let me confess, we are not always ready for heaven. Our desires are indeed too great for this world, but our loves are too small for the next. A man who clings to greed, envy, or lust would find heaven unbearable, just as a fish out of water gasps for breath. Heaven is not merely a reward handed to us like a prize. It is the natural home of those who have been transformed by love himself. Our longings are only rightly fulfilled when they have been purified. That is why the Christian life here is, in truth, a schooling for heaven. Our joys on earth are lessons in gratitude, teaching us to recognize the giver behind the gift. Our sorrows, painful though they are lessons in detachment, reminding us that nothing here can be held forever. Both joy and sorrow are tutors leading us home. There is a story, though fictional, it bears truth, of a bird who lived in a cave, mistaking the faint glimmers of light on the wall for the sun itself. The bird spent its life fluttering after those shifting rays, never realizing that beyond the mouth of the cave lay a sky vast with brilliance. In a sense, we are that bird. Our earthly joys are glimmers on the wall, lovely but incomplete. Only when we dare to fly toward the opening, into the presence of God, shall we know the true sun. This is why we cannot reduce Christianity to mere ethics or rules. Morality matters, yes, but it is only the training ground. The end of all Christian faith is not merely to behave better, but to become creatures fit for heaven, creatures whose longings finally find their true object. That is why Christ did not come merely to instruct us, but to transform us. His death and resurrection opened the way not to improve shadows, but to the very substance of joy. The ache of our hearts, then, is not an enemy, but a guide. It is as if God has placed in us a homing instinct for eternity. We may wander, we may mistake signposts for destinations, but the hunger remains, urging us onward. And when at last we see Him face to face, the ache will cease, not because desire has ended, but because desire has found its home. For heaven is not simply a place, it is the presence of God. To long for heaven is in truth to long for Him, the source of every beauty, the fountain of every joy, the light behind every shadow, and in His presence we shall not be less ourselves, but more. Every true desire will be met, not with the fading spark of satisfaction, but with the inexhaustible fire of love eternal. When I speak of heaven, I do not mean to suggest that our present world is a mistake or an illusion. On the contrary, it is a deliberate creation, endowed with goodness by its Maker. The problem is not that the world is bad, but that it is incomplete. Like the first notes of a symphony, it hints at themes yet to come, melodies unfinished, harmonies unresolved. To expect the whole music in these opening bars is folly, yet to despise them because they are incomplete is ingratitude. Every joy we experience here, whether in the love of a friend, the beauty of art, or the majesty of nature, is a foretaste. Imagine a man who, having once tasted the scent of bread in a bakery, supposes that the fragrance alone is enough to nourish him. He may enjoy it for a time, but eventually hunger gnaws at him, reminding him that the aroma is not the loaf itself. So it is with us. The fragrance of heaven is everywhere in this world, but the substance lies beyond. This explains why the deepest experiences of joy so often carry with them an edge of sorrow. A sunset that takes your breath away vanishes within minutes. A friendship of years may end with separation or death. A moment of sheer delight passes almost as soon as you recognize it. The sweetness is real, but the brevity wounds us. Why should this be so? Because joy here is a messenger, not the destination. It comes to lift our eyes beyond the horizon, not to anchor us in the sand. Even our bodies remind us of this transience. Youth fades, strength diminishes, beauty withers. To pretend otherwise is to live in illusion. But the decline of the body is not merely decay, it is also preparation. Just as a seed must fall into the ground and die before it can sprout into new life, so our mortal frames are but the husks of something greater. Resurrection is not the denial of the body, but its fulfillment, when frailty is clothed with incorruptibility. But what of those who resist this longing? Many try to silence it with distraction, with wealth, with power, or with endless pleasures. They build their castles of sand higher and higher, determined to ignore the tide. Yet the sea comes for all, and when it does, the man who has trusted only in sand is left desolate. But the one who has heeded the ache of the heart has already lifted his gaze toward a kingdom not built by hands, eternal in the heavens. You see, heaven is not merely compensation for earthly loss. It is the fulfillment of all that was true, good, and beautiful in every earthly joy. When you weep for something lost, remember, in Christ, nothing true is ever finally lost. The melody cut short will be taken up again, not in the same key perhaps, but woven into a harmony grander than we imagined. To long for heaven, then, is not escapism. It is the most realistic response to life. For if the world cannot satisfy us, the answer is not despair, but hope. Hope that what we long for is real and waiting. Indeed, the very impossibility of satisfaction here is the proof that we were made for elsewhere. A fish cannot thrive on dry land, nor a bird in the sea. Neither can the soul rest until it rests in God. It may seem strange to call this longing a gift, for it often makes us restless. Yet restlessness is the very medicine we need. Without it, we would settle too easily for lesser things. With it, we are driven onward, like pilgrims on a road who will not stop until they reach home. And home, for us, is not merely a place, but a person. For heaven is heaven, because God is there. To hunger for heaven is, in truth, to hunger for Him who is love. And when at last we behold Him, face to face, the deepest paradox will be resolved. Every desire will be both satisfied and unending. We shall drink from the fountain and never thirst, yet the joy of drinking will never cease. We shall be filled, yet forever hungry, not with the ache of absence, but with the delight of abundance. Desire will not be quenched, but perfected, like a flame that burns without consuming, a song that continues without wearying. If we take our longing seriously, we begin to see that heaven is not a luxury added to Christianity, but the very center of it. The faith does not merely tell us how to behave in this life. It tells us who we truly are and where we truly belong. Without the promise of heaven, our story would be a tragedy. With it, every sorrow becomes seed, every loss becomes passage, and even death becomes but a doorway. Now, some may object. Is not all this talk of heaven merely wishful thinking, a projection of human desire onto the sky? But this objection misunderstands the nature of our longing. Wishful thinking invents what it wants. Our longing, however, surprises us. It awakens when we least expect it, in a moment of beauty, in the ache of music, in the pang of love lost. We did not choose it. It chose us. We did not fabricate it. It revealed itself. It is not the product of our imagination, but the signature of our Creator upon the human soul. Indeed, the very argument that our desires are too great for this world should lead us away from skepticism, not toward it. If hunger corresponds to food, if thirst corresponds to drink, if fatigue corresponds to rest, then it is only reasonable that this strange homesickness for eternity corresponds to a real homeland. A desire so deep, so universal, and so persistent cannot be a cosmic accident. It is a compass needle pointing toward the North Star of God. And so, the Christian is called to live with two eyes, one upon the gifts of the present, the other upon the glory to come. If we close the first eye, we fall into ungrateful neglect of creation. If we close the second, we fall into idolatry of creation. Only with both eyes open can we walk as true pilgrims, receiving this life as inn and staging post, while never mistaking it for the destination. The tragedy of many lives is not that they loved too much, but that they loved too little, that they mistook shallow pleasures for deep ones, and thus never learned to trace their desires back to the fountain of joy. The man who worships money, sex, or power is not guilty of excessive passion, but of misplaced passion. He is like a child content with making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine the offer of a holiday by the sea. Our Lord does not rebuke our longings as too strong, but as too weak. What then does it mean to set our hearts on heaven while we still walk upon earth? It means, first, to receive every joy with thanksgiving, as a token of the greater gift. It means, second, to hold it lightly, knowing it will not last forever in its present form. And it means, finally, to let every joy draw us upward, not inward upon ourselves, but outward toward God, the source of every good thing. To live this way is not to become less human, but more. For our humanity is not complete until it is fulfilled in God. The saints, far from being ethereal beings detached from reality, are those who have learned to live most intensely. Their laughter, their tears, their prayers, their loves, all are transfigured, because they know they are on their way home. And what of that home? Words stumble here. The finest poetry, the richest imagination, cannot fully capture it. We are told of streets of gold, of gates of pearl, of a river of life flowing through the city of God. Yet all these are but symbols, struggling to convey realities beyond mortal comprehension. The heart of heaven is not gold or jewels, but God Himself, His presence, His glory, His inexhaustible love. All else is ornament to that central reality. Picture the weary traveler at the end of his journey, seeing the light of home at last. Picture the child long separated from her father, running into his arms. Picture the bride prepared for her bridegroom, radiant with joy. These images, though partial, help us glimpse what words cannot fully hold. Heaven is not the end of our desires, but their true beginning. It is not the conclusion of our story, but the opening chapter of the great book in which every chapter is better than the one before. The longings that stir within you are not foolish dreams. They are the whisper of eternity. Do not ignore them, and do not settle for less, for they are God's own way of calling you home. One of the hardest truths for us to learn is that heaven is not merely about our comfort, but about our transformation. We often imagine it as a place where all our wishes will be granted. Yet if our wishes remain as small and self-centered as they often are now, such a heaven would be intolerable. No, the promise of eternity is not that God will cater to our whims, but that He will enlarge our desires until they are great enough for Him. This is why the saints speak of the purifying fire of love. To enter heaven is to be made holy, and holiness is not optional. It is the very atmosphere of that country. A selfish man could no more breathe there than a fish could breathe on land. Therefore, the longing for heaven must go hand in hand with surrender. The doors of paradise swing open, not to pride, but to humility, not to self-will, but to those who have learned to say, "Thy will be done." It may be asked, will we still recognize one another in heaven? Will love, as we know it, endure? And the answer is yes, but transfigured. Love here is fragile, strained by misunderstanding, marred by jealousy, broken by separation. But in heaven, love will be made pure, without rivalry, without fear, without loss. The friend you loved here, you will love more truly there, because you will love them in God and with God. What was partial will be whole. What was temporal will be eternal. Nothing good is lost. It is only perfected. And what of beauty? Every glimpse we have here, whether of mountain peaks, of starlit skies, of music that lifts the heart, is but the faintest echo of what awaits. The colors will be richer, the harmonies deeper, the very air charged with glory. As St. Paul writes, "Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has the human heart conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him." Our present delights are, at best, postcards from a far country. They awaken our longing, but cannot quench it. We should not fear this longing. It is not a defect, but the very mark of our design. God has placed eternity in our hearts, and it is by this that we are drawn upward. If ever you feel restless, unsatisfied, even amid happiness, take courage. It is not that joy has failed you, but that it has succeeded in its purpose. It has stirred in you the desire for more, and that more is God Himself. It is often said that Christians are so heavenly minded that they are no earthly good. I would say the opposite is nearer the truth. Only those who keep heaven before them can bear the burdens of earth with hope. The early Christians endured persecution, poverty, and death itself, because their eyes were fixed not on what was passing, but on what was eternal. And so, even in suffering, they could sing. Even in loss, they could rejoice. For they knew that every shadow was but the outline of a greater light. Here, then, is the great paradox. The more we long for heaven, the more faithfully we can live on earth. For if we know that this world is not our home, we are freed from the desperation that clings, grasps, and fears. We can love more freely, give more generously, endure more patiently. For we know that nothing done in love is ever wasted, and that all shall be gathered up and made new in the kingdom. When we finally cross the threshold of that country, we shall see that every sigh of longing, every tear of homesickness, every ache for beauty was not in vain. They were all part of the melody that leads us home. And when the music resolves, when the door opens, when the face of God shines upon us, then, only then, shall we be truly satisfied. When I consider heaven, I do not think first of crowns or thrones, nor even of rest from labor, though these are promised. I think of waking. It is as though all our life here has been lived in a shadowed room, where we have known outlines, colors dimly, and melodies half heard. To step into heaven will be like stepping out of that chamber into the great wide world under the morning sun, everything sharper, stronger, more solid than ever before. What we called real here will seem but a dream by comparison. This is why I often describe our present experience as the Shadowlands. It is not that the world is false. It is that it is incomplete. Every joy here is an echo of a greater voice. Every beauty is a hint of a more radiant source. Every longing is the thread pulling us toward the tapestry yet unseen. The Shadowlands are precious, but they are not the destination. We must remind ourselves that this longing for heaven is not escapism. Escapism is the attempt to flee reality. But to long for heaven is to yearn for the greater reality. It is like a child in the womb longing to be born, not to escape life, but to begin it in its fullness. Birth is not an end, but a beginning. And so too, death in Christ is not the closing of the story, but its true first chapter. Here lies the great hope that steadies us in the face of suffering, for our longings are sharpened most in the crucible of pain. When all earthly comforts fail, the heart remembers that it was never meant to rest here. Suffering, dreadful though it is, performs a hidden mercy. It detaches us from illusions and reminds us that we seek a city whose builder and maker is God. And so, the Christian may endure pain with hope, not because pain is good, but because beyond it lies the joy for which we were made. Think of the pilgrim trudging along a difficult road, weary and sore, yet carrying in his mind the image of home. The memory of the hearth, the laughter of his kin, the warmth of welcome. These strengthen his step and lighten his load. In the same way, the hope of heaven is not a vague consolation, but the very fuel of perseverance. To lose that hope is to collapse by the roadside. To keep it alive is to walk on, however steep the path. And what of the moment itself, when we shall at last see him face to face? Language falters here. Scripture tells us we shall be changed, that we shall know, even as we are known, that every tear shall be wiped away. Imagine what it means for the human heart, so long restless, to find its true rest. Imagine what it means for love, so often wounded, to be healed and made whole. Imagine what it means for joy, always fleeting, to become permanent. In that moment, the deepest desire of every soul will be met, and yet the wonder will never diminish, for God is inexhaustible. This is why I dare to say that heaven is not merely the end of desire, but the perfection of desire. We shall not grow weary of joy any more than one grows weary of light. We shall not tire of love any more than one tires of breathing. Every moment will be fresh, every delight new, every vision deeper. Eternity will not be endless sameness, but endless discovery, as we plunge ever deeper into the ocean of God's glory. Here, then, is the final comfort. The longing that aches in you now is the surest sign that you are meant for this destiny. You may try to stifle it with lesser things, but it will not die. It is God's own invitation written upon the soul, summoning you home. Do not despise it. Do not fear it. Do not ignore it. Follow it. for it leads not to illusion, but to reality, not to wishful thinking, but to the one who is himself the truth. And so, my friends, we return to where we began, with desire. All through life we are haunted by it, that strange ache which neither success nor pleasure can still. We may call it homesickness, though we scarcely remember the home. We may call it yearning, though we cannot name the object. It is the quiet pulse within us, reminding us that we were made for more, and that more is not found in money, nor fame, nor power, nor even the noblest human loves in their present form. It is found only in God, and in that country where God is all in all. Do not imagine, then, that the ache of your soul is an enemy. Treat it instead as the compass of heaven. It is the holy restlessness by which your Father summons you onward. If earthly joys fall short, it is not because they are false, but because they are partial. They are windows, not the view, echoes, not the song, droplets, not the fountain. Receive them with thanksgiving, but let them awaken in you a thirst for the living water. This is why the gospel is not merely a system of morals, but the announcement of a homecoming. Christ came not only to forgive sins, though he does that gloriously, but also to fling wide the gates of eternity. By his resurrection, he has shown us that our deepest longings are not in vain. The grave is not the end, nor is desire a cruel trick. In him, every sigh of yearning, every tear of longing, every pang of homesickness is gathered up and answered. The wounds of the world will be healed, the shadows dissolved, the fragments made whole. Let us, then, live as pilgrims. A pilgrim loves the road, but only because it leads him home. He treasures the inns along the way, but he does not mistake them for the destination. In the same way, we must cherish this world as God's good gift, but hold it lightly, for it is passing. We are on our way to a country more real than this, where every joy is complete and every sorrow redeemed. Think of it. One day the longing itself will be transfigured into possession. The lamp will be set aside when the dawn comes. The hunger will be swallowed up in the feast. The homesickness will be ended by home. And in that day we shall discover that every true desire we have ever known was but the shadow of a greater desire, the desire for God himself. And having found him, we shall not lose him. And in him we shall possess all else besides. So I urge you, do not be ashamed of your longing. Do not hush it or call it weakness. It is your soul's testimony to its true destiny. Let it lead you beyond the shadows, beyond the echoes, beyond the fleeting joys of earth, into the everlasting joy of heaven. For there every heart shall be whole. There every love shall be fulfilled. There every desire shall be satisfied, and yet made endlessly new. There we shall see him face to face, and then, only then, we shall finally be home.